what I found after a couple of these exchanges was that there were some um, government employees, some three-letter agency people that were listening to what Dave and I had to say. We didn't know. One of them, a couple weeks after that, visited Dave at his pie shop. And there is documentation that demonstrates there has been a organized disinformation campaign to keep this information from going out or to steer the narrative. So in the meantime, I was leaked a transcript of a meeting at Camp David that President Reagan had being briefed on these matters. It's not for me to go to the New York Times with it, but it's for me to figure out, how do we disclose this information? These people that I've been communicating with are preparing to back up the fact that somebody really needs to tell the truth. Because I know what's next. I've been to Telos. Today is the day I convince all of you once and for all that you're about to have contact. If your vibration is at the level that it needs to be, you'll have it now. So you can either get on board and be a part of it, or watch as this all happens, and maybe you miss your ride to New Earth.
I'm really excited about our guest today. He is back by popular demand. We are talking again for a third time today with Mr. Lowell Johnson. So welcome back, Lowell. It is so good to see you again.
Ah, I wanted to make sure we didn't talk too much before we hit the record button, like is our nature. And usually when I begin these things, there's a connection that we're going to have, and there's
Mhm.
information we need to share before, we hit the record button, because some of it's still rather sensitive.
Mhm.
Anyway, so when we started to do that today, I wanted to kind of rein us back in, because at first I want to address whatever has happened since the first time we did this together in October.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely.
I meant to look at it today to see how many views it had had. And I'm not tethered to that kind of stuff, but you
Yeah.
can't ignore 189,000 views on a platform that
Right.
doesn't do that. So
Right.
there's something that got that message out and spawned it. The people that I've been hearing from, and Tara, I can't begin to tell you the number of people that have reached out and what they've shared. I have an archive of podcasts that I did. I did some with Dave Wallace. I've done
Mhm.
them with people along the way, but there are a lot of sessions I did that were more like, I imagine, what Dolores Cannon would have been like, where I was just the observer and listening to these people's incredible stories. There's at least 60 or 70 of those that no one have ever heard yet. Now, whether
Mhm.
they ever get shared, it's evidence that this stuff is going on, and it's been going on for a while. And so I wanted first to pay tribute to your platform, and whatever the mechanism was, um, it's been gratifying. It can be a little
Wow.
overwhelming. And there was a
Mm.
scenario at the beginning of last year, the very beginning. And by March, there was a push after my episode on Gaia had been premiered. And so a bunch of people I hadn't heard from came around. But whatever happened in October here wasn't like anything I've ever seen. And it spawned. So not just, I don't want to just focus on the number of people that have been here to listen to it. What it spawned beyond that, there was a friend of ours now in the Czech Republic who
Yep.
was so enthralled by it. She took it and ripped the movie and then translated it into her own language, where it's had 15 to 20,000 views of its own. And they
Yeah.
want more content. They
Mhm.
also want to see, how do we take the Ascension Handbook and translate that into their language? So
Wow.
I didn't see any of that coming. Not at
Yeah.
all. I put the information out there like I was asked to share it with others,
Mhm.
and here's the result that's happening. Now, you can't convince me at all that all of this isn't accelerating for a greater purpose than we really
Right.
understand right now. And that's what
Mhm.
we're gearing ourselves up for.
Absolutely, and I agree. I don't know what the magic sauce was that caused these videos to go so viral, but I'm grateful for it because, as I mentioned before we started recording, I feel like it's my job to facilitate these conversations, to share them with people. I don't have these experiences myself, but I'm very happy to offer a platform to people who do because I know somebody needs to hear this information. And as we mentioned earlier, I think timing is everything, right? So, up until now, and I know you've been sharing your story for several years since it happened in 2019, and maybe it just wasn't the right time to hear this information. And now it is because we're so close. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this today, but we're so close to this, whatever this is, it is that's going to be happening, this event, this change. I mean, we can feel it. It's energetically in the air, right? We can feel
Yep.
the cosmic rays coming down to us. So, I'm just so excited and grateful, by the way, for you sharing your story. So it has been so generous of you to share your time and your story with us. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. And I do know this is information that people need to hear. So in case anybody has missed it, which I don't know how you could, but in case you have, Lowell has very kindly and very generously done 2 prior interviews with us, which we'll link in the description of this video. So we would highly recommend that you check those out because those are fascinating stories in and of themselves. And those were both times that you visited Mount Shasta. But today, from what I understand, you're going to be sharing with us your experience when you visited Sedona, Arizona. So,
Well, we can touch on that,
mhm,
but frankly, I don't think that that's where this was all leading. I will tell you where I think it is, though. And you made a comment a little while ago about, well, I hadn't really been an experiencer, but I feel, through whatever my purpose is, it's my job to help get that information out. What I'm here to tell you today, and what I think session one set up for us, here is an example of multidimensionality. My trip to Telos was that. The second installment, I brought receipts and we showed pictures of
that's
light
right.
being interactions in the Shasta area the second year. Second example of contact first and multidimensional contact. So now, kids, have you been looking at all of these reports of extraordinary phenomenon and what's being recorded and what the government
Mhm.
still isn't willing to, just say we knew about it, we've known about it for a long time? You can tell this is all coming to an end, that
Yeah,
the veil is being pulled back. um, we just can't deny that it's happening anymore.
right.
So before I get off on some sensitive stuff, that maybe today is the platform with which to begin to reveal what's about to be disclosed. We've been talking about it for a long time. There have been lots of talking heads out there talking about different aspects of disclosure. And you can pick your flavor and decide what it is that you think we didn't know about and what we're about to hear about. After I got back from Sedona, and actually beginning a couple weeks ago, I wanted to see, because I enjoy seeing things from a Google Earth perspective anyway. I thought, I'm going to take the inner Earth locations. I know I'm going to plot them on Google Earth, so I know where they are. And then I went back and I looked at all of where the golden tile allotments were, and I plotted those. Used a different color pin so I could see where they were. And then I found some legit over 20 underground cities, third dimensional underground cities, plotted those on the map. And then I took areas where I had been that I had energetic experiences, some that I knew other people had, like the Bosnian pyramids and all of the Maya temples. All of them are plotted here on this project. So I put it out on my Facebook group a couple weeks ago to get an idea of what people wanted to know. And I kept getting people asking me about these places. Oh, here, let me just show you where they are. So I put it on Google Earth. I put it as a project. And if somebody's interested in seeing it, just send me your email address and I will send you access to the file and you can see where they were. If I had images and information, I left it in the description there as well. So there's a lot of information there. If somebody wants to see it in one fell swoop and you want to kind of get an idea of the energetic state of things, that was really the purpose. Um, I was shocked and amazed when it was all over where they were. And all this is given the current conditions on the globe. We know, I know, I should say, I can't assume everybody has the same level of understanding, but long ago, the land masses on the planet were quite different. If you believe in Mu and Atlantis and Lemuria, those were land masses that over time shifted like the planet did. Well, it's damn likely we're going to have another shift of land masses here shortly with the way that the poles are moving and the fact that the Earth is about to flip. We've already seen all kinds of crazy seismic activity. Unfortunately, we're seeing it like crumble now, landslides and these crazy things that are going on because of all these seismic tremors that are going on now in unlikely places. I know we just touched on Maine and it even made you surprised that, well, that's, you don't hear about those there anymore. Well, that time is behind us now. Now let's talk about some of these energetic changes that are taking place. And so I'm going to talk about some things I haven't talked about before because I've kept my mouth shut for a while now about what I thought I knew and what I was supposed to do with it. I think I've said this to your audience before. When I had my first experience with telos and I started to ask people about it, I wasn't telling my story originally. I was trying to find someone that could help explain it to me. And the nature of that information in Shasta, it just has its own fuel. And so the story became a story sooner than it should have. You made a really good point about the timing of when some information is supposed to land. And I have a greater appreciation for that. As much as I sense what's coming and I hunger for the day it arrives, I don't know when that's going to be. All I can tell you is energetically, the conditions are right that it could be tomorrow and everything will be different because it's going to be. At first, I thought I was supposed to tell everyone I knew because no one, no human was really privy to what I had experienced and what they believed. And then you kind of wade through where people are in their metaphysical state, whether they're open to that information or whether they're not. I certainly found a lot of people initially that were. You say Telos and Lemurians, and their ears perk up and they want to hear more. And then there's the audience that isn't ready for it, doesn't understand it, and it's outside of their constructs. You know, they haven't been conditioned with this information, so yeah, it can't really be true. We didn't have a huge following and weren't looking for one. So I want to make that clear. I wasn't looking for tons of followers. It was the right ones that resonated with the message that we wanted to get the message out to. We didn't know who was really listening to us until, was it last summer? Yeah, last summer. I started to get, had these messages that would come through WhatsApp. Very safe. It wasn't that people didn't know what my phone number was. You can find it pretty easily if you want to. And what I found after a couple of these exchanges was that there were some um, government employees, some three-letter agency people that were listening to what Dave and I had to say. We didn't know. One of them, a couple weeks after that, visited Dave at his pie shop and wasn't there in a threatening way, although Dave's experience with the government has been dicey in the past. He had lots of information. His original experience was in February of 2017. And a few years after he got comfortable with the information, he started to post them on YouTube and whatnot. And all of a sudden, his YouTube channel was shut down and his material is gone, gone forever. He didn't back it up, just gone. But this time around, something is different because these people, as what I can understand by the contact I've been having now since, and there wasn't a lot of it a year ago. That was setting the stage for what was about to come, though. They're in the same place we are energetically, that they're going through these changes metaphysically. And they want to understand for themselves what the hell is going on when they know that the government's known more about what's been going on and they've been keeping it from us for a while. When they can't get the information from their superiors, they're going to look outside because they want to know for themselves. They're going through the same human being things we're all going through, and they want to know. So, I had somebody while I was in Sedona last year, one of these guys, and I didn't know names, we didn't exchange any information. I didn't even know who they were at the time because I would get these types of questions from lots of people. I didn't know who I was really answering until last November. One of them reached out and wanted to see if we could get together. Apparently, he lives in the Phoenix area, but he'd drive up for the day, and that way we get to know each other a little bit better. Well, I agreed. We drove to a place in Cottonwood and spent the afternoon getting to know one another. And the amount of similarities between our backgrounds was almost laughable. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, so did he. He went to school in the Midwest, so did I. We're about the same age. When he got through with college, he went into intelligence services. Well, back then, they were really just getting their feet under them, and he got in at the right time. Over a period of time, he got more involved and had a higher level of awareness of programs that had to do with unidentified flying objects, any biomatter there might be from bodies that might have been recovered. He had a level of awareness of this stuff, and he wasn't the only one. He and a few others that I've met now over the last month or so are getting ready to look. They weren't in the decision making on tamping this down. And there's documentation that demonstrates there has been a organized disinformation campaign to keep this information from going out or to steer the narrative. We're well aware of that. So in the meantime, I was leaked a transcript of a meeting at Camp David that President Reagan had being briefed on these matters. And how this got to me, don't know. Same reason why a lot of other information crosses my path. It's not for me to go to the New York Times with it, but it's for me to figure out how do we disclose this information? Because I know where the source of how the leak came to me. It came from one of these guys that I met. I'm not going to talk about names or who they do or what they are, but they want to know. And so they are in a position to begin to share what they know. They no longer work for the government because of their age, but they're still considered contractors, and there's still a clause of, uh, confidentiality. But look, we're so far past that. All of this kind of almost spearheaded. I had met a few of them here in Minneapolis a couple of Mondays ago, and it was right after the drone incident in New Jersey. And of course, the buzz was, what are those things? And the White House and the government and the Pentagon marched out these peoples and kept denying, what it was and what it is. And, look, there's too many of us that are already connected in some way that we know that this stuff exists. So these people that I've been communicating with are preparing to back up the fact that somebody really needs to tell the truth. And they're not going to be able to send anybody out from the government anymore because we don't believe anything they've told us up to now. So we've got to find some credible sources. That's where I believe that Dave and I are being pressed into service. So, we haven't been in, I can see what makes sense out of this. We didn't get sucked up into the spiritual world community and, have been on that tear for a long time. We're not that talking head. We're experiencers that had things that we're sharing because it's imminent for all of us. And today, I think this episode was to take, we know that this exists. We have documentation proving it after the second time we sat around. Today is the day I convince all of you once and for all that you're about to have contact if you wish to have it. If your vibration is at the level that it needs to be, you'll have it now. Every effort from higher sources, higher intelligence, your higher self, however you want to see it, is stepping in by synchronicities and crazy things that just seem unusual to get your attention right now because of this energetic shift that's going on. They're trying to help us prepare. And it's not as though they're, the mechanism for the information that we require is that answer that, yes, it's inside of us and we need to unlock that. But all of these things are happening. DNA is being cracked open by people in, my generation. And we're beginning to have these experiences, and we're recognizing it in the young people behind us, generations behind us. They don't seem to be quite as handcuffed as we were coming into this incarnation. And that's why those kids sound so worldly, so old, soul person. They have wisdom. They came here to share too, if we'd only pay attention. But we get so locked into the things that we think we know from a 3D perspective that we neglect all of the things we don't understand. Well, that, my friends, is where the magic is right now. And all I can say, and I've said it before, find a way to get your vibration to rise and keep it there. Along the way, you'll see the difference on what one feels like as opposed to the other. So your internal barometer will always tell you if I'm vibrating high enough. And if you are, then I promise you find the right setting and the conditions, and those beings will show up. Dave was out the other night, sent me some pictures, was Saturday, as a matter of fact, that he had asked for contact and went outside, and there was his friend's ship. Took lots of pictures of it. So this stuff isn't fairy tales anymore. Nobody's guessing at it anymore. There's plenty of evidence about it, but we're just tired of showing you the evidence. Um, I left. I bought some infrared goggles before I went to Sedona because I wanted to start to capture the stuff myself. I'd seen others do it many times. And honestly, I got to tell you, Tara, I got so tired of doing it that I left them with somebody else because I had so much material that I didn't need to go out and see it. It's out there every
Mhm.
night if you look, and in crazy ways to see it. But we're still in the process of readying those. Most of your audience is in tune with the idea that this stuff is in existence. And so we don't have to convince them very much. I'm here more to validate what's going on and to give you an update energetically that these incidences of metaphysical exchanges, yeah, it's all on the rise.
Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just thinking as you were sharing there that there's several ways into this conversation from different perspectives, meaning there are people out there who need the proof, right? They want to see the pictures, they want to see the evidence, the videos. And then there's the people who just energetically can feel the connection and maybe connect in dream state or through meditation. And then there's the people who potentially may have had an abduction experience. So there's a lot of different facets to this topic. And I just want to touch upon one thing you mentioned, because I think this is important to note that, and you kind of touched upon it briefly, is that we have so many people in the military right now coming forward as whistleblowers. And I think that is so important because that resonates with a certain person, right? There's certain people that need to get this information from that level of a credible source. And they're finally getting it. They're getting the
Yes.
testimonies in front of Congress. And these congressional hearings are now happening on a regular basis. I mean, we're starting to see them, several times a year almost. We've got big names that have come forward: Lou Elizondo, Ryan Graves, David Grush. The most recent one is Jake Barber. And the information that they share is just so fascinating. But if you really listen to the stories they tell, they correlate a lot with the stories that people who have had in abduction experiences or maybe have a connection with an off-world society through meditation, or maybe that's in their lineage. There is a path that crosses with all of this information. So there are definitely wires that cross, and you just have to kind of look for those breadcrumbs and connect the dots, as I always say. And I just think that's so important because a lot of people need to hear something from a certain person. So that's why I think it's vitally important that people like you share your experiences, because your story will resonate with a certain level of person. And then at some point, all of this information, I believe, is going to come together, and eventually the whole story will be available to everyone to hear. But at this stage, just however you get involved in understanding the truth of what's happening, that's the important thing here, is just get involved in understanding what's happening, what the truth is, what stories and lies we have been told in the past. And now what does the future look like? What
Yeah.
can we expect? So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I think it's an important thing for people to hear, because a lot of people come into this conversation from a different avenue, but it really all connects up and it all relates to each other.
It, that was explained to me kind of at the get-go when when I was trying to put my telos experience into perspective. There was a channeler who would help me out, and she helped put that into perspective for me then. Um, Sometimes I fail to understand when this information is presented in the way that it has, that more people don't resonate with it internally. Um, you talked about the fires and what potentially might have been the cause for that. There's been enough of that that's been going on that when the idea of direct energy weapons, do things are
Mhm.
suggested, I've kind of tuned that out in the past because it didn't resonate with me. However, it's one of those things that you just can't ignore. Just like people that have been abductees, it wasn't my experience, so I don't know what I can put into it. And it was going to take Tony Rodriguez, if you know Tony and his
Mhm.
story. um, Tony was the one who helped put it in perspective for me at first, and I'll be honest, when I heard it at first, I didn't know what to make of it because it just wasn't mine. And really, we have to relate to people on their own experience levels so that they get it, and everybody is on different journeys. So um,
Mhm.
but later, when I had an opportunity to see a film of where he had been, because he and a friend Tyler had gone to visit the space, and oh my God, when you see it in real terms, now you can understand that better. when I look back at the research and some of the documentation that's found its way to me now, when we've heard about abductions, that they're not as nefarious as they're made out to be to sound. Now, I'm not saying that there wasn't a period where humans were taken for experimental purposes. I can't deny that. I've known it's taken place. Um, there have been some unsettling things that have happened, and I can't deny that for the people that have gone through them. But I think a lot of it was really misunderstood because none of us had those experiences. So somebody had put this into perspective on people that claim that they came back with some marks. More than one person I've heard that, and I've seen it, some photographs of it, and somebody finally made that made sense to me. Now, you've got to have a fundamental understanding of dimensionalities and densities to understand what I'm going to say next. Because in order for those people to go into those realms, they had to vibrate at higher levels to be in that higher frequency area, right? So, whatever experiments they wanted to perform, I know that they're extracting DNA for purposes for their own planets. Humanity is spawning here for other purposes galactically. So it's not that unusual that we wouldn't assist. Now, the way it went about it, yeah, that was upside down. However, um, it was said that now, after that experience, when you're taken away, and to be in that realm, you've got to vibrate at that experience. Well, when you come back, this is not the same density. And so that coming back into your body adjustment is what I had heard and resonates with me, that these marks had left their had left signs of that activity as a
Hmm.
result.
Hmm.
Now, if we see it from that perspective, then the people that have had, and I can't call it, Dave was not an abduction. He was a willing participant to go and learn what these people had to teach him. And he's not the only one. This is what we're all trying to help you understand, to prepare for. If you want to have contact with higher intelligences from elsewhere, not just beyond the planet, but there are other civilizations here lurking in other dimensions on our own planet. The earth is positioning herself to be in that state permanently soon. And this 3D lessons of duality and hot and cold and black and white, we're done. We're moving to the next level of consciousness. And that's the drum we've been beating all this time, so that the rest of you will understand. Since the first podcast and 189,000 views later, I can't begin to tell you how many people have reached out and explained their circumstances. So look at whatever momentum it picked up, because I've looked at your site and you guys have done a remarkable job. But there were only a few, including the second one I did, that reached like 50 or 60,000. How did this one go so ballistic? We don't know. We're not supposed to know. All we're supposed to do is just carry out this message that we're doing right now and enabling others. You see how we lit the fuse for others, like you were talking about before? I tell my story to this, and now the story is being told to others. Um, Elena in the Czech Republic took the first two episodes that we did together and has already translated it in her own language, and her people have seen it tens of thousands of times.
Wow,
So
that's
we know we're
incredible.
having an effect globally that none of us were paying any
Right.
attention to before. But boy, I'm glad to be on this side of the table.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening, what Lowell's referring to is that there was a young woman who is in the Czech Republic and who has her own YouTube channel. And she took such an interest in both of Lowell's prior videos that she translated them from English into her language. And she has had a tremendous response from her own audience, which, again, similar to mine, was not that large in size, but the viewership has just skyrocketed even beyond however many subscribers or followers she has. So I, number one, appreciate and very honored that she took the time to do that. And it's amazing to me that this message is just, it just has tentacles. It's just spreading far and wide. And like we said earlier, I think it's meant to. I think this is the right time. People need to hear this information, and people are open and more receptive. And maybe that's because we are raising our vibration. People are more open to these concepts and these ideas. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It has a little bit to do with the military finally coming forward, with the slow drip disclosure to allow people to be open-minded to these concepts. But either way, I think it's fascinating, and it's very important and very necessary right now.
I agree. There, the week before last, the day after the inauguration, um, there was a shift in the energy that I felt that day. And somebody else, we were talking about what had happened on your podcast and how that phenomenon had taken off and the timing of all of it. And it was after the election when it really started to pop out, where people's attention wasn't on who the president was going to be anymore. Now they got back to the real lives and, oh, well, let's pick up where we left off metaphysically. And oh my God, look at what's happened since then. Then we got after the inauguration, I just felt where the real splitting of the timelines, 3D and 5D, are actually taking place here that day after the inauguration. And I'm not speaking politically, I'm not speaking from that perspective at all. I'm just telling you that what I sense is that greater idea of separation. And you're on that team, I'm on this team, just got much more profound. So there is where the third dimensional part of it had just got locked and loaded. So this is on its way to entropy, while the rest of us vibrating right already have our foot in the next dimension, are following New Earth in that direction. How long do you think it's going to be before that entropy is? I can't say. What I think is going to take place before that is whatever this solar phenomenon that's going to change New Earth into New Earth. I think that's going to happen before we worry about how the Earth really tears itself apart, because we're watching it happen with a handful of people that are causing it. We're all tired of it. So
Mhm.
it was going to take, as I said long ago, a shift that we didn't, there had to be a cosmic shift in Earth's energy for that to happen. Humans weren't going to kumbaya enough together to make that happen for Earth on her own, but we still were not the mechanism that were responsible for her consciousness rising in the first place. She's on her own
Mhm.
path. We're here to be part of it. So you can either get on board and be a part of it, or watch as this all happens, and maybe you miss your ride to New Earth.
Exactly. And I agree with you. I think we were separating. The 3D was kind of separate. Kind of think of like two old, circles kind of intersecting, and they
Like
were kind of
mitosis.
separating.
Yes.
Exactly. And then once we did get past that point of the election, I do feel like that was a pivotal moment in time. Once we made that decision, and especially after the inauguration, that's when it was like, that was a definitive. Like we actually
Yes.
locked into that higher timeline at that point, where it was all kind of speculative up to that point, like would we not? But now we're there. We are actually moving on. We've already moved on to that higher timeline, and then what's coming next. And I know, just in reference to the solar flash, I had a guest recently who Ann Tucker, who talks a lot about, she talks with angels, first of all, she channels angels, but she talked a lot about the solar flash. And she explains, and that's just fascinating as well as a topic, but she talks about how there'll be 3 days of darkness and what will happen during those 3 days, which, of course, as we know, has been spoken about in the Bible. And that those 3 days will be a 3 day period of time for us to just receive the energies that are coming in from the sun, that is raising our vibration, and that is what's shifting our DNA molecules to go from the carbon
Yes.
state into a more crystalline state. And that we
Yes.
should really just allow, it's a time for us to sit, relax, allow, take it in. Don't go into fear, because if you go into fear, or if you go into a place of, oh no, I have to do this or I have to do that, and you're panicked about things that you need to finish, you're missing the point, and you're actually not accepting. But by doing that, you're rejecting the light. So
Yes.
if you do want to continue to move in this direction of the higher vibrational earth that we all want to move towards, you need to accept that light and allow that to transform you. So anyway, I just thought that was a fascinating topic, and there's a whole video about that. But yeah, that's what I look forward to, is moving on to that new earth state.
I had heard from Ann and a colleague as a result of our little get together too. And I saw something she did, I think it was like a month ago. It wasn't very long, like 3 or 5 minutes, explaining that whole phenomenon in just a snippet. And she gets it. She understands exactly what's going to take place. Now it's just a matter of when. But I hold out. I'll say this again, that this is not sometime into the future, boys and girls. We are still in solar maximum and expect to be there through 2026. So the conditions for the earth, or the sun, to fire off flares that are going to adjust the Earth's frequency. We're going through it right now. If you've been paying attention to any of this solar phenomenon I've been watching it for the last 2 years, so I'm definitely dialed into when it's accelerated. And we got a couple brushes just the other day, something that shouldn't have affected us the way that it did, but it did. So if you need more evidence that the magnetic field is breaking down, protecting Earth, here is what it is. We're about to get hit with, I don't know if it's going to be a kill shot. It was kind of put in my head that one big jolt's going to come and just do it. I tend to see, when I see these series of flares coming at us, the coronal hole and then the CMEs that follow, I think it's going to be one of those circumstances where the coronal hole stream kind of opens up and loosens the cap on the jar, and one of these CMEs behind it would just nudged it enough for the earth to finally flip, and here we go.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting time, but it's something we don't quite know what to expect or when. Really, it's
No.
just one of those things. We just have to be open to it and just continue to raise our vibration in the meantime the best we can.
Focus your intent on what you think New Earth is, because that's what it's going to be. You are a
Mhm.
co-creator, and you weren't given these gifts haphazardly. You're going to help with this transition. Everybody that's here on the planet should be aware that this phenomenon is going on and be an active part of it. I doubt it that yeah, I don't hold out that everybody's going to make it that way. I'm kind of back to the place where like less than half of us are really ready to make it. And I'm not saying, that doesn't say that, the rest of the earth is going to die. It means that those souls were not finished playing their 3D lessons out, and they're going to
Mhm.
find another place in the universe to do that very thing. The rest of us are moving on into higher levels and deciding, we're not going to reincarnate anymore. We're done with 3D lessons, but we're very interested in where New Earth is going. So we're going to stay and see what her new vibration's like before we decide that we're going to become galactic travelers again, because at one point we were. We were galactic travelers to get here to participate in the Earth experiment. So it's not going to be long before we can do that again. When our bodies change and the type of physics that Dave has to explained to us on how we get from place to place, it made me conclude humans have no business being in space. Our bodies aren't adapted to it. The spacecraft that we send up there really isn't ideal for it. We've done the best we can with what we've got. But if you look at what our friends from other places, they don't deal with any of that. Their bodies aren't subjected to that. And their spacecraft moves in ways that is remarkable to us. We're so interested and used to seeing things that have to be propelled. Yeah, their craft doesn't work that way at all. So
Right.
stay tuned.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because you just mentioned about the past and where we came from, and I actually just got a Akashic Records reading from Debbie Solaris. And I found out something kind of interesting. Everyone always comments that I look like I'm from the Pleiades because I think I have the typical look of what a Pleiadian would look like, which apparently I am a little bit. However, that's not my origin. My origin is from Ceres, Lyra, which is the home of humanity. And then
Yes,
I spent time on Ceres, and then I was a Pleiadian in the
Pleiadian.
Pleiades. So I've had a few different star systems that I've originated from, but the main one, the very first one, was Lyra. So it was just a little bit interesting to find that out. I was like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting, but it definitely kind of opens the mind up to what was my life like back then, and she kind of shared
Yes.
more, which I won't get into, but it was just fascinating to learn more about the origins.
You know, I hope that other people are curious enough to wander down those timelines and find out for themselves their past lives, because they can. It's just a matter of quieting your mind enough. And there is the reason why more people haven't reached the level of awareness that we have. And it's time, really. The amount of time you want to spend on that, believe me, it'll be fruitful when you can quiet your mind and figure out what your intent is on what it is that you want to experience. It'll come, but you have to quiet yourself enough to do that. Knowing what my life was like before, when I had a family and kids and a job, where in there do you notch out time for yourself to, quiet your mind and let it wander to where the universe wants to take you? It's not likely. But what I will say is that in all these people that have come around since our first little podcast, more and more of them didn't go back to like the 2015 and 2016, 2017. No, no, no. These people are even more recently awakened than that. So here is more evidence that this effort is building.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I think these conversations, as I've said before, are so beneficial, so necessary, because you don't know what's going to trigger an awakening in someone. It could just be hearing this conversation. It could be one part of this conversation. There could be a memory that pops in. And that is so important right now because we need to try to awaken as many people as possible so that we can move as many people as possible into that new earth vibration. And that's how I feel so called to do this, because I feel like the more we have these discussions, the more people we interview who are open enough to share this information. Because going back to like what you just said now, you had a 3D life, as I call it, and we're locked sometimes into that way of thinking. And
Yes.
we really need to open our mind and expand the possibility of what the truth really is of life and earth and why we're here and what is beyond the scope of this planet. Because if you're kept in that little small mindset, just what they want you to believe, so that you just go to work every day and you do your job and you come home and you watch TV at night and take your kids to soccer practice on the weekend, as you mentioned, you don't have the time to just let your mind expand.
No.
And that is just so important to break out of this matrix. I mean, I know that's a word we all use, but it really is like a matrix because it's keeping you kind of confined into a certain way of thinking. So I think part of it is just also raising the vibration enough to where you can open your mind into these new concepts.
I, I don't know that I'd ever heard it put that way before, but now I can appreciate the rebel side of me more, that I didn't really allow people to lock me into things that I should think. I wanted to know for myself. Um, you were talking about some of the witnesses that came up for the government. And although the effort is there, I don't think they're being any more productive than they were before. We're not learning anything new, and it's still all being disguised. But I will say that it just emphasizes my interest in hearing from real experiencers, not talking heads, not people that heard about it. I want to hear people that were there and had the experience. Those are the ones that are valuable for me. There are hundreds of talking heads out there, and I'm not interested in any of them. I got caught up in that community for a while and I saw it for what it was, and I'm not interested in participating anymore. And that was a sad thing to say because, as we pointed out, there's an audience that needs to hear this information. And some of it likes to be exchanged in real time. So I enjoyed the conferences from that perspective. But when I saw what the real purpose of the conference was and what the organizers' kind of intent was, I got it. And it I'm still convinced that these people have had some remarkable experience in the past, and then their ego got the better of them. And so then it became more about selling lots of books and being a best-selling author and the number of views that I've had. Look, none of that was interesting to me. And it didn't prevent me from having experiences. Not there. The other thing is that I feel too many people want to tag themselves to these personalities, and that is who I work through. I'm here to tell you that it's not necessary to tether yourself to anybody else. Many of us have experiences with that will help you on your journey, but we're not here to guide it. And anybody that tells you they have a one, two, three thing that they have that only they have, and you should pay them for it, the red flags should come up immediately. You already have this information. And as we've said before, we're not teaching anything new. You're not learning anything new. This is all stuff that you've had in prior experiences that you're just unlocking because your DNA is at a point where you're about to be able to use these skills and abilities again because you're going to be in a realm that vibrates at that level. So, um, get ready for what you might think is crazy and extraordinary and magical because it's about to take place regularly.
Absolutely. And as you just mentioned, I think as we continue on this path and as the energy continues to come into the planet, it's going to continue to raise our vibration, which only brings on more of these experiences. So don't be surprised if you start seeing things that you never saw before, because that veil is coming down. That veil is thinning right now, but eventually it
Yes.
will come down. And so we have to prepare ourselves mentally for what we are going to be experiencing and what that will be like to interact with other species.
Well, my message is twofold then. One, it's to get you ready for um, the probability of experience. You're going to have it if you want to have it. The other is for those of you that vibrate that want to have contact, it's happening. It's being recorded while it's happening. So just stay at it. And I promise it's going to yield fruit for you too. It's meant to. Those of you who have an interest in contact, you may want to start to see yourself as ambassadors because the first contact is going to be that. Dave has had some visitors other than the visitors he went off planet with. And they've been here, think of them as the due diligence people. They haven't been to the planet yet either. So they're coming to see what it's going to be like to experience Earth, to see what humans are like and what their atmosphere is like. That is going to be on the rise. There's all kinds of that activity and contact and experiences that are taking place now. And more of them are happening with people that are at these higher vibration levels. It's not going to stop happening. It's going to increase. And the more comfortable we get with it, the more comfortable our visitors get with it, and the more of them begin to visit. It's We're at the precipice of a whole bunch of intergalactic travel and experiences here on this planet that I can't say hasn't happened. We just haven't been vibrating at a level to experience it. But man, enough of us are now, and we're seeing the traffic come and go.
Right. And I'm most excited about the collaboration efforts. What kind of things can we learn from these more technically evolved societies? How we can plant our food in a more holistic and healthy way, and what kind of healthier foods we can have, and what kind of ways we can help our bodies to be more healthy, right? I mean, that's just one aspect, but there's so many things we can learn from them. So I'm excited about what that looks like. And I don't know if you know who Gosha is from Cosmic Agency, but I did an interview with her, and she communicates online through the keyboard with with an off-world species, and which are humanoid. They're from the planet Taygeta, and she has so much information to share about what their world is like, which is fascinating to me to learn about. What is their culture like? Do they, and I was asking her these questions, do they tell jokes? Do they like to go out on the weekends with friends? What does their family structure look like? What do their homes look like? What does their art look like? Like, these are things I'm just so curious about. But I look forward to the day when we can actually interact and get direct answers to those
Right.
questions.
You know where Taygeta is, right? It's in the Pleiades
It's in the Pleiades.
constellation.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a Taygetan.
Look, when I had the same inklings you did about my celestial roots, if that's what you want to call them, Pleiadians seem right to me too. And Taygeta, there was something about that word that just rung like a bell through me. But I've had Antares shines and sparkles at me, as does Sirius and Vega and Rigel in the Orion belt. So I, like you, think that I've had experiences in these other places, but I can't say I'm from there. I think we've all been in different places, and that experience is helping us through this.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I got as well from my reading with Debbie, is that I'm actually here for a reason to help with ushering in this new age, coming from that background and wanting to kind of help Earth raise the vibration. So it's interesting when you look at things through that lens, it kind of gives you a little more purpose, I feel. But I am curious, because we did mention it in the introduction, and I know you have been to Sedona, Arizona. I know you don't want to focus a whole lot on it, but I would love if you would be willing to share a little bit about the experience that you had when you visited Sedona.
um, I spent a lot of time out hiking. There are absolutely energetic vortex areas there that you can't help but trip over. But there's something about it that's a lot more pedestrian. And what I mean by that is that kind of energy that Sedona gets, especially on the weekends, with people that come from Phoenix to just, we're going to do the hike over the weekend and then we're going to be gone. That energy, you can feel the difference there. I never really sensed that when I was in Shasta, and I'm sure there are people that come from all over the world, but the energy was just more mature there than it seemed. I guess that's the only way that I can think of the best way to talk about it. Um, there is absolutely positively Lemurian energy in the area where I was, in the greater Sedona area. And while I was there, I got a greater appreciation for the extent of Lemurian preparations in that area. Because if you really understand what I believe the remnants of Lemuria to be, part of that was the western part of North America. So this is why Shasta's in the mix. This is why there's Lemurian energy in the Sedona and the southwestern areas. That's the reason why. There have been some suggestions that there's another underground facility that's being built in the Groom Creek area by the Lemurians as we speak, with one in Prescott. I think they said Phoenix and Albuquerque. More importantly, while I was there, is I should probably talk about Jimmy Blanchett. I met Jimmy while I was in Arizona. He wasn't, he's not from there originally. He's a Canadian scientist, and the guy is a amateur ham radio operator. And he's very interested in physics, and mathematics is his background. So he's been interested in wavelengths and that kind of thing. And so when he first heard about the CEI or CE5 programs with
Stephen
um,
Greer.
Stephen Greer, he thought that was great. He wanted to put a group together where he was in California at the time. And as many times as he wanted to try and go out and do it, um, he just couldn't get everybody else organized. Anyway, he had enough gumption himself that he wanted to find out if he was to broadcast this signal out, would he get a response? So he's set up this array, this antenna array that looks like four long fishing poles, you know, those long antennas, all on one array. And now he's got it mounted so that if he wants to tilt it or move it, he can, to point it at different spots in the sky. Well, he had set up a signal that he was going to broadcast, the CE5 signal, but he was going to do it at different frequencies so that he made sure that he hit all the frequencies at once. Well, this antenna he's got can broadcast, what was it, at least to the moon and back and bounce off the moon. And he's got another shortwave band that's like 150 watts. His other one's 250,000 watts, and the shorter band's 150,000 watts. Anyway, the first night he went out, he was just going out to just practice. He didn't know what to expect. He wanted to go out in an area where there was no light pollution and no sound pollution. So he went out in the desert in California to find an area where there wasn't going to be any kind of bleed, any technical bleed. He had a radio with him, and while he was setting up, the radio started going off. Well, he was trying to meditate. He only went out there to set it up and see what the conditions were going to be like. He didn't really understand. He was getting a freaking response. Wow. Well, he he even put it, the radio was annoying me. I was trying to meditate, and I couldn't focus on it. Well, it wasn't until he got home that thought finally, well, wait a minute, maybe that was a connection. So he determined to go out again quick. And again, he was trying to organize this with a bunch of other people. And when it all fell out, he went on his own. This time he took 3 radios with him, all programmed to the same frequency. So physics should say that when that frequency is hit, the radios should respond accordingly, right? Well, after he broadcast the signal, he waited, he had these 3 radios, and he had videotaped this process. You could see one radio responding at a frequency, and then it would stop, and then this one would pick up on it, and then this one might, and then these 2 might, and then all 3 might. It wasn't the same. Wait a minute. We're getting the same frequency, but it's responding differently on each one of the radios. It's just crazy. So when I listened to it, what Jimmy had shared with me first, because we had done a Zoom session together, and I wanted to understand more. The more I heard what he was capturing, oh man, I've heard this before. I understand this vibration. And Jimmy, I think we can interpret the signal that you're getting. So that was kind of when I left Arizona, where we had kind of left this project. Jimmy and guys like Robert Grant have
Mhm.
moved forward with this project. And I know for people to understand what Jimmy's trying to explain, because he likes to put this in mathematical ratio terms, and
Mhm.
he gets it, but it goes over
Yeah.
most of the rest of our head. It doesn't take away, however, that Jimmy has established contact, and now it's up to us to figure out what it is he's receiving back. So
Right.
we're going to pick up where we left off from there to see if this, and clearly it can be replicated anywhere. Jimmy's just
Mm.
got some incredible ham radio equipment that makes this great. Oh, I should leave, or shouldn't leave out that when he finally moved from where he was in California to Arizona, set his array back up in a real a remote area again, but he put a camera on it this time. So now while he's um, broadcasting the frequency out the arrays, he can video what's going on the horizon. And now to see the craft that's come in from the messages that he sent out, that's a whole other phenomenon that we've been kind of studying and understanding. But holy
Mm.
cow, kids, this is happening. There's no question in my mind at all anymore. It's just a matter of time before this is really more understood widespread.
Yeah. Wow. Is he still continuing to do his experiments?
Oh yes.
Wow.
Yeah, Jim, this is what Jimmy was built for, but he's taken it as far as he could, and that's when he reached out when he did. It's we all want to understand the nature of the communications taking place. Even those of us that understood about CE5s and think that we understood when we were getting a response because we'd see things in the sky, this was different. This was an audio response we were getting back in some manner, and it was defying the laws of physics because it was spawning across these radios. They all should have been lit up identically, and they were not.
Wow. So I'm guessing he hasn't been able to decipher quite yet what the responses have been that he's been receiving.
We're going to work on that project a little bit more in the
Okay.
next couple of months or so.
Okay. Let me know when you figure that out because
Absolutely.
we have to
That'll be
have you back to talk
news.
about that.
Yes. Yeah.
I kind of wonder, just as you were talking there, could it be that if there is such a higher level society, meaning higher vibration, that lives off planet, and they're the ones that are corresponding in this way, could it be that's the way that they're corresponding because they are at such a higher level versus, let's say, for example, we all kind of know that we have beings that are here on this planet with us that are
Yes.
off-world beings, but they've had to lower their vibration in order to come down into this
Yes.
physicality, right? So
Correct.
that's the reason why, because some people might say, well, what's the difference? I don't understand. Why is it that some beings can be here with us supposedly and others we're trying to communicate with off planet? I look at it as a difference in the variation of their vibration. Would that
Yes.
be an accurate
That's
way to consider
exactly
that?
right. Yeah, if we can help everybody understand vibration levels, you will sink into this world so much easier because that's what defines it. High level or high frequencies, in order for you to experience the things at these higher frequency levels, higher vibrations, you must vibrate at that level. And those of us can speak about it are proof that yes, it takes place. So it's a mindset. If you can clear your mind enough to quiet it, to finally reach into those places, believe me, they're responding.
Right. And, I was thinking also that in regards to vibration, again, one of my favorite channelers is Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar. I just love the messages that he brings through. And he has shared about his experience trying to interact with Bashar on the physical. And Bashar would warn him and say, you can't handle this. You're not going to be
That's
able to
right.
handle the level of vibration that I offer. And in that time, at that time, Daryl said, "No, I can handle it." So he attempted to meet him face to face, and he said he was just overwhelmed with this vibration, but he went into a state of fear, and that's part of the reason why we haven't had that physical contact yet,
Right.
because they know that we will have a fear state within us that could be triggered by their vibration. And even who is it? Jake Barber, who just was recently a whistleblower that came out, he shared in his testimony when he interacted with an egg, like a sphere that he had approached and I might be getting some of the details not correct on this, but I recently watched an interview that he did. And this was a UAP that he was interacting with. And he said that he had this overwhelming sense of, I think he described it as sadness, like a sadness that came over him, and that it was a feeling of love. He said, I like the only words I can put on it is love, but also coupled with sadness. And then there was a little bit of fear. And he said he was so shocked that he was having these emotions, like he was having this emotional response. And this is a military guy who, I think he's in the possibly in the Air Force, which, they go through rigorous training and they have to go through psychological exams. And he started to question, am I losing my mind? And he was afraid to go back and talk with his superior about what he had experienced in that moment. But he said it just gave him a different mindset and a different view of how we're going to be interacting with these things, because he wasn't anticipating having an emotional response. It's one thing to have a physical response, but you have to account for an emotional response as well, as a potential way of how we're going to be interacting with these things. So anyway, it's just something interesting to think about. We do have to prepare ourselves not only mentally, but emotionally for this contact that's coming up.
That's the vibrational part. Absolutely. I can't put it any clearer than that. How we're going to sense, how we're going to communicate with them. They are not going to speak to us in English or Dutch or Japanese or Chinese or any other. No, no. They speak with us vibrationally. And we already do that with a lot of people that we know. We're beginning to kind of fine tune that purpose again. Dave, I keep referring to Dave, but Dave and I over the last couple of years have just, we laugh because we prove it over and over again. I'll think about him in the morning and he'll call me by the afternoon or vice versa. It just happens that way when you're on the same vibration with somebody. They know that you're already in touch with them. That's going to be more widespread. And we stop focusing on just the damn phone in our hand. There is a lot more of the universe that's being opened up to us right now. And we're all trying to get you to stop looking at your phones so you can experience all of this incredible stuff that's coming. Is it going to be unsettling and freak you out the first time? Quite likely. But
Yeah.
um, that's the fear component we need to get past. That was, I think, when my awareness really opened up, was the day that I could just put my fear behind me because I know what's next. I've been to Telos. Take me tomorrow and I'm good to go. So I don't have any fear over this carbon body anymore. I know what happens to my spirit and I know where I'm going next. And so I'm eager for the day that that comes. In the meantime, it's my job to just tune out all the other white noise and focus on the light that's coming and do my part to continue to spread it.
Right. And the
Yeah.
military knows that's how these beings communicate. They actually have psionic specialists on their team so that they can communicate in that way telepathically, because they know that's what the future is for us. And I find it interesting because I know when you shared your story, you said they did speak with you in English using actual words. Was
Yes.
there at any point in time, did you have a telepathic exchange, or they just spoke to you verbally the whole
After
time?
after that.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Wow. And I always wonder, what does that feel like? What is that like? Is it that you're just, do you hear your own words in your mind and but they're not your words, so that's how you know that's what they're communicating? Like, what is that exactly?
Yeah, boy, I wish I could put words to that thought because for a long time, when this level of awareness kicked in and I started to say profound things, I didn't know where it was coming from. So it's kind of the same thing. I wish I could tell you where it came from, but whatever it was, I started to write these things down because they sounded so profound. I wanted to read them again to myself later because I didn't come up with this. Um, I don't know the answer to that. It just seems as though, again, we're unlocking information we've had at our disposal for a long time. And the time for us to come into its awareness again is right now.
Mm. And have you had any further contact with the Telosians that you were in communication with?
um, I wander there every now and then, but when I start to, it's funny. Remember when I was telling you about that in body, out of body sensation and how that kind of came in? It was after that that I finally became aware of when I was leaving my body. I knew I was capable of bilocation, but I couldn't tell that sensation when you claim you're astral projecting and you've actually left this body. Well, there are times when I was sitting, like the first few times I was learning how to meditate. The second day, I could tell I was sitting on this chair, but I was so relaxed. I couldn't feel my butt on the chair. I couldn't feel my feet on the floor. I knew my hands are on my legs, but I couldn't really feel that in. Where did my sensations go? And that is where those are the sensations I associate when you leave your body. Well, now that happens frequently. And so when I go to decide to wander, I know I've gone somewhere when I come back and it feels like I can't move my legs because they're still asleep. No, no, no. You're coming back into your body. Now, the more that happens, the more you get comfortable with the idea. Uh, and at first, again, I thought it was just my body was so relaxed and so fell asleep that that's what it was. And I'm waiting for it to wake up. No, no, no. You went somewhere else, and now you're coming back into your body. It took me a long time to understand when people would tell me about what that sensation was until I finally experienced it for myself. So those of you that might be having similar circumstances, that's what I would chalk it up to. You are just so at peace and so grounded that it's easy for you to wander down other timelines. But when you do that, you're leaving this body behind. Makes sense.
It's interesting because I'm right now reading a book by Robert Monroe about how to have an out of body experience. And the way you just described that, so far from what I've read, is exactly how he's explaining it should feel and what to do and what the sensation is. That your body, basically, your mind is awake, but your body is asleep. And so when you're
Yes.
coming back into your body, you feel the like tingling sensation of your body essentially waking up. So I'm curious because you just mentioned that you're able to do this. Do you have an awareness of the conscious experience that you've had when you've actually left your body? Like when you come back in, are you like, oh, wow, that was interesting. I just traveled there and this is what I experienced and what I saw. Or does
Yes.
it take time to integrate that?
The first couple times you don't have as much recall because you're so the Capricorn in me wants to understand the process. It was like I went through my first ayahuasca journey. I wanted to know what the shamans were doing, so I wasn't really paying attention to what I should be doing. But this is a lot like that. So, but now that I've had a couple opportunities to do that, um, it makes more sense to me. That's what it feels like the way I described it now, but it took a few times for me to come to terms with what it is. And I didn't really remember the experiences because I was so focused on the process. Now, when I just let the process happen, now I can remember where I've been. And oh no, the pictures are vivid. Some of them, not as many, are going back into your past like I would expect that they would. You're going to remember things you did before. No, no, I see other timelines. Not, I don't see myself projecting into the future. There's just something in me that says you really can't do that. And no one else can tell you what your future is going to be like because you haven't made the next choice yet. So
Right.
I leave myself open to that, but nonetheless, I'm going places and experiencing things.
Mm. And I have to ask this because, again, when I'm reading this book, it does talk about the fourth dimension being the astral realm, where this is where the unpleasant things reside, right? Like the ghosts and the goblins and the archons and things like that. Um, that is something I think that could cause people to not want to try this because they're fearful of what could happen if they have an interaction with one of these beings. And also, again, the silver cord is something that supposedly connects our soul to our body. And if that silver cord gets cut, then we're detached from our body for good. And that would be when we pass away on earth. So Can you share a little bit about that? Do you know anything more
Yeah.
about the fourth dimension and the silver cord?
Yeah, the astral realm is where we go in between incarnations. You're either going to go decide at that space that you're going to evolve, you're going to ascend, or you want to play some more lessons out, which is what we've been doing all this time. We've continued to reincarnate to play out 3D lessons here on Earth in an attempt to help Source know more about itself. We are sparks of Source, and we're here with a soul contract full of lessons we signed up for that are unique to us. I'm going to learn the bad stuff, I'm going to learn the good stuff, and when I'm done, to collect the benefits from it. But no one's journey is the same, no one's lessons are the same. We are here on that trajectory. Now, the astral realm is like the 3D realm. There is some unpleasantness that was there, but it's also in the process of evolving. And that sensation just isn't there. I know that the fourth dimension, um, four and five are still physical in nature, but we're changing to a different form here. And I suspect that your crystalline form kicks in the fourth level and locks in the fifth. Um, but there's higher intelligence there. And I suspect that that overwhelms the amount of negative energy that's there. And I would tend to help people understand it's where we all go. All of our souls go back there to tag up. When you think that you've lost your family and friends here, no, no, no. When we're done here, you'll see them all again. Their souls are still doing what they're here to do as well. But we're not going to spend too much time in the fourth that fourth realm. I don't think that there's much. It's not designed to spend a lot of time there. You're either going to move into the fifth dimension, or you're going to stay and play out your third dimensional lessons. Is kind of how I see the astral realm.
Interesting. I was just listening to a podcast. They did an interview with Tom Campbell, who has written the book, The Theory of Everything. And he's a physicist and a theorist. And he he tries to delve into what is consciousness and where does it come from. Like, we call it, some people call it God, some people call it source energy. I mean, it's pervasive. It's literally everything, everywhere, at all times, right? And it's infinite, which I think our little, 3D human brains just cannot wrap our minds around that. I certainly can't. In fact, when I start to think of infinity, like when we pass, there's infinity, I start to panic a little bit. It's scary to think this never ends. Like,
What we don't know is what makes us fearful. And so when you start to
right.
think about the idea of infinity, I can't even consider. I don't know what that is.
Right. The only thing that gives me a little bit of comfort is when I think of from this point onward to infinity, I panic. But if I think, well, I've already been in infinity up to this point, like my past was infinite, then I'm like, okay, I'm okay then. I know that sounds weird to say.
It's your 3D brain responding in the way that it's been conditioned to respond. And we need to
Mhm.
break past that. Really. If we want to have magical experiences, then when they're presented to us, don't say, yeah, that can't be true.
Right. Right, because literally anything can be true. I mean, this is
Yes.
what Dolores Cannon talked about in all of her many books that she wrote is, and this was a hard thing for me to also wrap my mind around, is if I can fathom anything in my mind right now, if I picture like a six-legged horse that's purple with a mane that is orange, like that exists somewhere in this universe because I had that thought.
Correct.
Which again is like the power of your mind, the power of thoughts, the power of consciousness, however you want to put that, which is also, I mean, that leads into manifestation and how you create, right? This is how we create because we bring these ideas into our mind and we focus energy and attention on them. But I mean, that was a really big concept for me to wrap my mind around, because there are things that you don't want to believe exist in the world, in the universe, I should say, in the multi-universe. So yeah, I mean, these are big concepts. I love thinking about them and talking about them because I think it's important that we do open our minds up to all of this. And this, bringing it all back to it, it includes UFOs and aliens and ETs and UAPs, or whatever you want to call them. So yes, it
Yes.
does. It's all included. It's all encompassing in this way of life and living that we have going on right now.
Well, I think we've run all the gas out of this for today. I'm not ruling out that we don't have one of these in the future, but let me propose this idea. Um, Perhaps we can see if there are others that might want to interact with us. And so
Yes,
if you want to push out an idea, I've got 100 seats on my Zoom platform. So if we'd like to host that where others can actually come and participate, um,
absolutely.
if you want to organize the time, you
Sure.
just let me know when, and
Okay.
maybe that'll be best for people. Instead of just listening to us, give them an opportunity to
Yes.
actually ask us things.
You are reading my mind, because that was something I was going to ask you if you were open to doing. I think people would love to be able to ask questions and interact with you, and be able to have more of a conversation about topics they want to discuss. So I'm going to ask everyone if you can put something in the comments of this video of different things you would like to hear us talk about, and we're going to go ahead and organize that, and we'll let you know when we set that up, because I think that that would be very beneficial for people to have that experience. So I appreciate you
I
offering that.
actually I prefer an exchange. It's not that I
Mhm.
don't like these interviews. I do. I enjoy doing them, but I would rather address a question that somebody's got, and
Yes.
it's just likely somebody else in the audience has the same question. So I'm thrilled. Let's plan on doing that next.
Perfect. We will definitely work on that. We'll get that set up, and we'll do that sooner rather than later, because I think
Good.
people are really interested in this. So, well, Lil, thank you so, so much. I mean, I just so appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing your time so generously, and I'm just grateful for you. So, thank you for sharing everything and all your knowledge and information. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara, and congratulations on your podcast. It's something.
Well, you have a big part to do with that, so I appreciate you.
Thanks.